case, I guess we're ready to start that. And do we have to do it any differently that we're a hybrid, Eric?
I don't think so.
Okay, so the first item of business then is a motion for approval of minutes from,
Well, let's call.
oh, let's take roll, I guess, first. Yeah. Forgot about that.
See Wilkinson and Urban remotely, and I see Bachhuber, Giebert, Shaw, and Crow here in person. So we've got 6.
We got 6. Who besides Julie?
Julie and Grace Wilkinson, and we're missing Ken, it looks like.
So Grace doesn't show up on the screen here right now.
Right. She's not. I can see her.
If I say something, I'll probably hop up higher.
Okay,
Hello.
there.
Hello.
Hey, Grace.
Hi.
You said you were here, but I didn't see you.
You just appeared. All right.
Okay, now I need a motion for, well, you took attendance, so I need a motion for approval of the minutes from April 19th.
I'll go ahead and make that motion.
We have a second.
Okay.
Oh, go ahead. I think that was Grace.
Okay, we have a motion for approval and a second. So all in favor of approval? Aye.
Hi.
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes are approved. And the first item of business is the Rock Ridge Development Stormwater Management and a request for fees in lieu of. So Eric, you want to start an introduction?
Yeah, I'll give a brief introduction. This site is off of Pleasant View Road across from the golf course. Water Resources looked at it a couple of years ago for a different project. And then I think it was last April, the developer came with a concept plan that you reviewed. The complicating factors with this site is that it's sitting on that rock ledge. Water Resources had previously directed a diversion to Pleasant View Road and to not infiltrate into this sandstone bedrock. We did check with the designers for Pleasant View if the diversion would work with their storm sewer system, and they didn't see any negative impacts really at all. So we didn't have to upsize any sewer or upsize the downstream pond for that.
Is your mic on, Eric? I have a hard time hearing you.
To accommodate this diversion. Is that better, Warren?
I don't think it's on.
I can hear him
It's on.
okay.
It's not loud.
Is this one better?
No. Can you? We're having a hard time here.
I'm not sure that it broadcasts up here.
It may not.
Oh,
Well, it ought to be working, but what I'm most worried about is that the remote listeners can hear.
You're coming
Grace?
through well remotely.
All right, I'll just talk louder.
okay.
Or try to. Somebody's perhaps got a mic on. It's me. So those were the two issues. Whether or not to infiltrate, basically, and to make the diversion. So the current plan hasn't really changed that much from the concept. The diversion has been made. They're asking for fees in lieu of infiltration and recharge. The performance has actually decreased from what they showed us on the concept plan a year ago. And we had asked them to try to increase that. The point I was trying to make in my memo is that we've kind of put them into a difficult position with telling them they can't infiltrate into the ground and then asking for more infiltration. So Justin Zampardi from Veerbecker is here, and he can present this plan, I think, and talk about what's changed a little bit and what his constraints are with the design.
Good evening, Justin Zampardi with Veerbecker. Am I able to share my screen with you?
You can give me 1 minute.
Ken's here.
Oh, you can.
All right, Justin, you should be able to share.
Hopefully everyone can see the colored site plan on the screen. So overall, the layout is very similar to what we had before. We've got 3 buildings on the site, each of them with underground parking. The underground parking actually extends out beyond the actual building footprint. And so that's where we're planning to do our green roof area. In regards to kind of our site layout, so we've got one large underground stormwater management system in the middle of the site under the parking lot that's treating majority of the site. And then we have a secondary system kind of towards the front entrance that's picking up a lot of the perimeter drive along the north and west sides of the property. And then some of the reasoning for the decrease from our concept layout is really just further design of the buildings, going through our approval process. And with so I do have a kind of a typical rooftop area highlighting some of the green roof areas that we're showing because of the width of the building and the area. There were some building code issues with us having to provide a secondary access off of these areas. That's why we had to reduce some of the green roof area footprint in order to get an access out off the upper patio space area. As Eric mentioned, we are our site is approximately 5 acres. With the diversion, we're capturing around 3.9 acres of runoff and directing that into the proposed storm sewer in Pleasant View Road. And then really the areas that are running off-site around the perimeter that are kind of hatched in red is really the steep slopes, kind of the existing steep slopes around the perimeter that just aren't feasible to capture. And all those areas are primarily green space. With that, I guess I'll leave it up for any comments or questions that you may have.
Well, one on infiltration, you didn't try and make any attempt to do infiltration. The one we talked about, the previous site, was a single building in the center, and they had an infiltration basin off to towards the north, which is close to that sheer wall. And that's the one we thought might present some problems, but this is a different configuration, and it looks like you made no attempt to do any infiltration. I really think you should at least show us some infiltration potential and before we make a decision. This is a different configuration, and with the loss of VT, the flows are going to double, so we're going to have a lot of increased volume of runoff, and I think you should make some attempt to follow the ordinance.
I don't think the site layout is the constraint for the infiltration. It's the bedrock, the fractured bedrock below that is the reasoning for the infiltration exemption.
Well, it isn't the fractured bedrock. It was because the fractured bedrock was close to that cliff, and the water may move laterally and cause some problems. So I think there was enough infiltration in the fractured bedrock to meet the requirements. It's just the location was wrong.
Are you, Warren, it's a question for Warren. Are you concerned if they were to enhance infiltration in the central part of this parcel, that the water will still move laterally, or you think it's not likely?
I don't think it's likely. I mean, our office, USGS,
Yeah, you're
had a lab down there, and yeah, there was some seepage going out there, but there wasn't that much lateral movement. During the winter, you see some icicles, but it wasn't huge, so.
okay.
And we were there for 20 years, so it was never a major problem. Now, rocks falling off was a problem because they had to put a net up there to catch them before they went into the parking lot. But we didn't see that much lateral movement, and even if they built an infiltration basin there and caused some problems, we could always give them permission to stop using that basin too.
Is the only infiltration being achieved right now is like 30-some% from the grass areas? Is that what we're looking at, Eric?
From the green roofs and from whatever areas of the site are remaining pervious, just getting passive infiltration.
Okay.
In some of that green space, couldn't you put some infiltration basins in there?
Well, but we're on the edge of the cliff again, though, Warren.
Well, not on the other two sides.
The
Yeah,
green
well, those-
spaces around the site those are steeply sloped on the east and south edges.
But the only ones is a sheer cliff is the one to the north. The rest of them are a steep slope, but it's not the same as that cliff on the north side going, looking over that parking lot. How much is fees in lieu of for a site like this, Eric?
Justin, do you know how many square feet of impervious there is?
I don't off the top of my head, but I think in your memo, I think you estimated that it would be around 20,000.
Oh, good, I did that.
Yeah, the memo does say that.
20,000 was what I was guessing, Warren.
Was the cost to build some kind of a basin for infiltration? Probably a lot more.
Correct. I mean, there's also, clearance requirements from bottom of infiltration basins to bedrock that, is also a limiting factor.
3 feet of soil, 3 feet of separation normally from the bottom of the infiltration.
I'm not sure what that means.
If you have an infiltration basin that's vegetated or whatever, like a rain garden, basically, and at the bottom is vegetation, you still need, I think the number is 3 feet, Eric, if I got my numbers right, 3 feet of soil before you hit bedrock. Is that?
But you need 5 feet of clearance from the bottom of your infiltration depth to the top of bedrock.
Okay.
I believe for the prior development, there was a geotech study that showed we could get infiltration here.
Yeah.
The issue that we've been having lately is not from DNR, but DSPS and much more strict interpretation of, limitations on infiltration. So I would guess they would not accept that.
Your stormwater retention basin, can't you get infiltration in the bottom of that?
No, because that is essentially sitting on top of the bedrock. We're actually excavating out bedrock to even be able to fit that system in there.
What is the bedrock composed of? What kind of bedrock?
I recall it was sandstone, Ken.
Yeah, okay. Well, sandstone bedrock can be permeable.
Yeah, I think we might have a hard time convincing DSPS of that.
Not that's not permeable, but that doesn't meet their criteria. That you say.
Correct.
Yes.
You might have a hard time convincing who.
Safety and professional services through the plumbing code.
These things become plumbing issues, not stormwater management issues because of the storm sewer connections to the
There's kind of a ongoing argument between DNR and DSPS about who's in charge of reviewing infiltration.
So you're saying if we approved required infiltration, it may get denied later on?
It could very well get denied by DSPS. That's been
So
happening.
If it gets denied, then we have to do fees in lieu of it. At least we tried.
We're most likely gonna get denied by DSPS for it because we're not gonna meet the separation requirement.
Maybe it's answered with a phone call, Justin.
We've tried that before. They typically won't give judgment until they have a full submittal.
Little different question on the underground stormwater quote unquote treatment system. Is that just for peak flow control? Is that what that is an underground box to hold water?
Yeah, peak flow and sediment, yes.
And on the peak flow issue, I'm not understanding that. I didn't delve into this terribly deeply, but on top of page 13 of the report is a peak flow post-development summary table. Yep.
Yeah, so what we were trying to show in this table is, the captured area that we highlighted in that report was 3.89 acres. And so our post-developed flows running through our stormwater facilities are essentially meeting the pre-developed rates for that captured area.
Yep.
What kind of the rest of the table is showing is, so for the perimeter around that we're not able to capture, that is this no controls column. And then if you were to just strictly look at the 5 acres in total from a pre to post, the table is showing that we're not meeting that. That really ends up being a time of concentration, and just the peaks of the storm are different from when you look at the map for the whole site. This has a longer time of concentration running off as opposed to same grass area that has a shorter length. So it shows a increase in flow, even though it's the same pervious grassed area.
Right.
So really, we were kind of looking at it from the standpoint of, from the area that we can capture, this roughly 4 acres, we're running it through the stormwater system, and we're matching or reducing peak flows on that. And then the green space perimeter, is running off undetained.
Yep.
And really, this 4 acres is also a diversion from what is currently, going down the hill offsite to neighboring parcels. Is being reduced down the roughly 1 acre.
Eric, when this water from that's going into the new Pleasant View system, that's going to then flow north to Highway 14 in a storm sewer? Do you know where it goes from there?
It flows north to Quarry Road, and the Pleasant View project is building a new basin on part of the co-op property
Oh.
just upstream of South Pond.
Oh,
So it'll go through there, then to South Pond.
okay.
So it goes into South Pond eventually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With or without the diversion, this would drain to South Pond. Just taking a different route.
So I see the staff recommends not to approve the stormwater plan the way it is, but Or you think they should go back and try and meet our ordinance for peak flow?
All I asked was for you guys to review these fee and lieu requests. I am not finished with detailed review of the plan. And I laid the infiltration and recharge request, at your discretion. I did not make a recommendation. I did recommend denying the request for the peak flow.
All right.
I think, Justin, that you could simply overcompensate for the areas you are, or within the areas you are capturing to, keep the peak flows a little bit lower.
Yeah, I think, Eric,
Areas
we can talk
capturing.
about that and work something out. Yeah, we can certainly add a couple of more chambers in it. And also, I think one other piece that's hurting us around the perimeter is just the change in curve number.
Yeah, understood.
Changing up. So we lowered it a class. When, I think possibly we could look at reducing that curve number since that is staying green space from what it currently is, which would reduce some of this post-developed no controls flows. So I think we can come up with a design to get those numbers closer in line.
So I'd like to see some attempt to do some infiltration before we consider fees in lieu of.
Or at least find out the DSPS ruling on that.
You said you couldn't find out until after
Well,
you submit the plans.
You gotta submit something, yeah.
Yeah.
So the motion would be request the developer to submit plans to DSPS for infiltration on the site. And also that they reanalyze the system to meet the peak flow requirements from the entire site, not just the currently treated site.
That would make sense to me.
I guess before we continue, I believe we had the same discussion last meeting. And, I think ultimately we came to the resolution that infiltration was not good for this site, and that's why we're seeking the exemption. So I guess I'm kind of curious of why we're going back from what we've already decided on last meeting.
I don't think so, because I've raised the same concerns before. And I said our only approval, it was on the previous design, and your design is different. So I raised the concerns about infiltration last time.
I think I must have misinterpreted that too then, Warren. I thought that Water Resources had said no infiltration, not just no infiltration at the northeast corner.
Is Ken having a thought on this? 'Cause I know Ken was right involved with that discussion also.
Yeah, no, I think we need to get some infiltration.
But you share the concern not along the perimeter areas. Is that what we're trying to say?
Yeah.
So you put out a motion, right?
I started to, but I in my head, I agree that this infiltration is not going to be approved because of the soil depths. We already know the soil depths here. And as much as I like the idea of getting infiltration, I also understand limitations of what they have here. So we can force them to do this design and submit it and get it rejected. Or
I think to follow our ordinance, I think that's the procedure we should do. In my mind.
Eric, have you had interactions with the DSPS folks and had a discussion similar to this site in the past?
Not similar to this site, but several sites recently have been approved by Eric Rortfed at TNR and then disapproved or not approved by DSPS.
And to get to that point, you had to have a design of some sort to show them.
It's a very rigid procedure in my recollection. You set up an appointment for plan review. I can't confirm what Justin's saying, that he needs to submit a full set of plans, but I'll believe that completely.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, we've tried on similar projects to try to get a determination early. And they will not allow it. They want a full submittal in order to make their determination, which just means we spend time and money to make a design and a report that we know is going to get denied and ultimately change it back to what we're currently showing.
Well, at least then we know for sure.
Yeah, but you're making these guys do stuff that's not gonna get us anywhere.
The previous one was ready to go ahead with infiltration, except for the being close to the cliff with lateral flow. So I don't understand what the difference was from their design versus this one. The only reason we said we're concerned about it is the basin was located near that cliff and they're worried about lateral flow. And we don't know what design they may come up with here.
All right. If the commission wants to vote to do that, that's fine. I'll just be a minority vote then. That's all right. I can live with that.
So you withdraw the motion you started to make then?
I can still vote against my own motion, I guess, can't I?
Pardon?
I can still vote against my own motion, right?
Sure, yeah. Someone's got to make the motion, so
Uh,
I could do the motion in my name with your
Sure.
your wording that you had.
All right. Go for it.
Can you capture that wording again, Eric?
Motion is to deny the request for peak rate control fees in lieu and to defer a decision on infiltration fees in lieu until the developer comes back with an answer from DSPS.
Right, they should make an attempt to do infiltration where they can. It
If
may
I'm
not
under-
be able to do for the whole site, but maybe at least partially.
Can someone clarify for me, are those two components of the motion necessary to have together, or should this be something we're voting on as two separate motions?
I made them as one. I suppose we could separate them, but I guess
I'm
we could-
just
we
hearing
could
from the
try-
discussion.
we could try this one and see if we get a second and what happens to it.
Okay. I was just hearing from the discussion that the second component of the motion seemed to be the part where we had discussion and contention. So,
I think you're accurate, Grace. I agree with your comment.
Well, we have a motion right now. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion on the table for is there any further discussion or clarification that's needed?
I would like to propose that if we don't vote this to approve, that we would separate out the two issues and vote on the peak flow versus the infiltration issue separately. But you got to second it, so you got to take a vote.
Okay, all in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. So that's 2 in favor, opposed,
Hey,
Nay.
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 Okay, so the motion fails. You want to try and separate them?
So the first motion is to read the first part again, Eric, to reject the peak flow fee in lieu of request.
Yes.
That's about what it is, right? So that's my motion.
Second.
Is there any further discussion or clarification needed? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Aye.
What was the count?
3 and 2. I'm not sure how Ken voted.
I'll support it, yeah.
Was that Urban that voted no remotely?
No, I voted in favor.
Oh, okay.
I also voted in favor.
So that's 5-1 is what I get.
Okay.
And just for clarification, that was for the peak flow.
That was just peak flow.
Okay.
Eric's tending to some technical issues here.
I don't understand how the mic doesn't in this area. You think the council member would have a hard time hearing what's going on?
They just have the 3 speakers.
Is there a speaker there?
There's 3 speakers on one in line with the
Oh, yeah.
telephones. And there's nothing back here.
I'm hearing better because I'm underneath the speaker.
It's not so good back here.
Okay.
Okay, we addressed the peak issue. Is there any other discussion on infiltration?
Well, what's the direction then if there's no,
Yeah,
We need a second motion.
I need a motion, yeah.
Go ahead, Ken. Thank you.
Well, I guess I would make a motion that developer tries to meet our ordinance for infiltration on much of the basin as possible before we consider the fees in lieu request.
I'll second that.
Is there any other discussion on this issue?
By the wording in the motion, that means we'd be requiring that they go to DSPS.
I guess I don't know about that requirement.
Okay.
I guess if they came back and showed us what their plan was, and I don't know what the submittal procedure is after that.
Eric,
So-
could you perhaps clarify the potential pathways forward here?
so if they increased infiltration in some other way, providing a green roof or additional green roof.
Right.
Trying to provide a perimeter facility that would meet separation requirements from bedrock or groundwater.
I think they should make whatever attempt that's possible to meet our requirements for infiltration as best they can. And if they can only do like 50%, we could then consider some partial fees in lieu of.
All right, Grace, to answer you, I think, I don't think this site would get approved for infiltration through the plumbing code. I think the only way to increase the infiltration would be through additional green roof.
Well, I think it's up to the developer to come up with a plan.
Yeah, they could do a lined
pushing back on that.
biofilter, I suppose, that could, increase evapotranspiration essentially. I think the bottom line is it's not going to affect their the dollar amount, because I think that'll be based on recharge, which they won't be able to increase. because of these bedrock problems. So the fee's not going to change, but we could increase evapotranspiration perhaps.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any more clarification of what the motion contains? If not, all in favor of the motion? Aye. So we have one in favor, opposed?
Nay,
Nay.
I heard two opposed and two for and one against. I'm not sure about that.
Ken, did you vote?
I voted for, yeah.
So there's 2 for, I only heard 3 against. I did not hear Grace or Julie vote.
I didn't hear Julie or Grace.
No.
I voted nay.
I'm
We can
sorry.
use our emojis under reactions. Those, the no and the yes, maybe to help clarify, because it seems like there's a lot of delay with the audio.
And I'll vote in favor.
When I'm screen sharing, I don't think I can see your emojis.
Then never mind.
So how does the vote come out then, Eric? Do you know?
I don't know. Julie and Grace,
do a roll
what did you
call or
vote?
something. then.
Let's do a roll call.
Do it. You ready, Eric?
Yeah,
All right. Bakuber's a nay.
Ebert's yes.
Shaw, nay.
Potter, yes.
Crow's nay.
Okay.
Griffin, yes.
If I'm up, Wilkinson, nay.
it's 4-3 no.
So what are we gonna do then? What's the alternative?
4 and 3 in favor or against? I didn't.
4-3 against.
All right.
So the people who voted against, what's the alternative they have?
They pay a fee in lieu of.
Wow. Okay,
What I'm hearing from our discussion is that this is not a site that's going to be able to meet the infiltration requirements. And I think what I'm hearing from Warren is that based on what the ordinance is for Middleton, we want them to be able to try that. However, it seems like a Sisyphusian task to ask them to go forward in doing that. So that's where my opposition to it came from. Am I capturing that correctly, or is there something else I'm not understanding that others could help shed light on?
we really need, they really need to come back with how much they can do. I mean, they can certainly do something, and if they can do 70%, that's, I hate to say they're not gonna do anything because they can't do 100%. We gotta get the most we can get.
Okay, they are gonna do 30-some%, right? 32, 30, something like that.
That's recharge, not infiltration.
I thought that was a combination of the green roof and green spaces.
What Justin's plan shows is 61% infiltration.
It's infiltration for impervious area, not existing green space. You can't get credit for lawn that's already green space.
Unless you added some. I guess they haven't added anything. Okay.
No, it's right now actually has a higher ET probably with all the trees and shrubbery that's there. So the lawn shouldn't be a credit for infiltration.
You can get passive infiltration.
Are they running some impervious surface to those lawn areas?
No, I would say very little. By and large, they're running the impervious through their peak rate and TSS, underground detention systems. And these aren't exact numbers. Justin will still have to, work through the details with me and Elliot Mergen. But in principle, it's the same argument.
Well, I'm not sure where that leaves us, so.
I think somebody would have to move to do the opposite of your motion.
Right,
or
into motions.
we won't have an answer for the developer.
That's only a recommendation from our committee, right? So I guess we couldn't agree
I
on.
think fees in lieu is
Pardon?
a Water Resources Commission decision.
It's only a recommendation from us, so right?
No, I think this particular thing is you're making
required.
a call.
Well, a developer could come back with some, without having a motion, could come back with some kind of a plan to do some enhanced infiltration. Doesn't sound like they're willing to do that.
I think that was the motion that was just voted down,
Yeah.
wasn't it?
Well, they could do it on their own. They don't need a motion from us, right?
They won't do it.
They've made the request to Water Resources.
And we're not getting approval so far.
Can we just take a step back? And if I personally feel like, because I wasn't here for this original discussion, I don't believe, because that was in April of 2022. I feel like we're starting in the middle of this conversation from my perspective, and I'm trying to play catch up. So there was a request for recharge fee in lieu, and we just said no. And then there's this request for infiltration. The committee had requested last time for additional infiltration to be a part of the site, and it in fact got reduced. Is that what I'm understanding?
It did get reduced, but I don't think they took anything away that caused that reduction, Grace. I think
Okay.
it was just a result of more detailed modeling.
Okay.
It came in a little lower. Justin, can you perhaps talk about the green roof and what changed between the concept plan and the current plan?
Yeah, I mean, the concept plan, there was no design for that rooftop amenity space. So we just assumed a certain area at that time. As we've gone through further design, and city approvals, we've gotten, further layouts on what that, rooftop amenity space is. And, like I mentioned earlier, per the building code, we had to have a secondary access because of the area off of that, which reduced some of the green roof area. I mean, so that's really the biggest change from before. I mean, we were still gonna have the underground system for peak. I think our green roof area dropped from, I think it was 3,000 square feet is what we assumed per roof, to 2,000 square feet,
Could you?
which
deepen
is
the
about
median?
27% of that rooftop amenity space.
Could you improve performance by deepening the media that's holding the plants?
So we're currently have a combination of primarily 6-inch green roof, and then we do have some 12-inch planter areas where we're trying to get some larger plant material to grow. That's something I'd have to look into. It all depends on kind of the elevation difference from the finished grade of that roof to the top of the precast lid on that for the parking structure. So I don't know that we can get too much deeper on that 6 inches.
Is it accepting runoff from other portions of the roof?
It is not, no.
Right now, it stands that they're gonna have to come back with some kind of additional information on peak flow, right? Is that Eric?
They'll have to adjust the design to not ask for fees in lieu for peak discharge, yes. But that was the motion, which was approved.
So they're gonna have to come back, submit more information.
It wouldn't come through water resources so long as they met the ordinance
It'll
requirements.
come to you, back to you.
Yeah,
They could, even though we don't have a motion, they could address infiltration again too.
they could.
And we could allow it up to you to make the determination if it's partial fees in lieu of or whatever, or bring it back.
I mean, the only viable solution would be adding additional green roof. We're not gonna try to do anything on site with the soil conditions.
Well, I guess we're hung up. We never reached an impasse before.
Somebody could make a motion that the designer investigates additional green roof solutions. Perhaps.
I would move that and would add to the motion that when if bringing it back to the Water Resources Management Commission to do a full presentation explaining. So give us more of the background next time you come back. So that we can all be on the same page in the conversation moving forward. So my motion would be to ask them to investigate more about the green roof and bring us a full presentation if they bring it in front of this commission again. That's the motion.
I'll second that.
You want to clarify that motion, Eric?
I've got it. Investigate additional green roof and provide a more detailed presentation the second time.
I have a hard time hearing what you're saying.
And provide a more detailed presentation on the history of the project the second time so that Grace can catch up. And I could probably provide some of that discussion.
It'd be nice to have some graphic to look at in on this thing. You know, we're all trying to remember what we talked about many months ago, and so it would be nice in the next presentations to have some graphics so we can see exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah, and you'll have a new member also, so that would be to her benefit as well.
Yeah. When I put this before you guys in April of 2022, I did provide a kind of fuller background information with minutes from the discussion from the prior development a few years earlier. So I can just bring that back again.
Okay,
You need a second on the motion?
I'll
I-
second.
I
I think I already did have one.
Oh, okay, thank you, Dave.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion's carried.
Okay, thank you, Justin.
All right, thank you.
I think I'm gonna stay home from now on. I could hear much better at home than I can here.
You switch to hear better over here, or just slid down one notch if you want to. Switch. Let's just try that. So I think I inverted it out of that speaker.
Not exactly sure what I can vote yes for. Oh, it was time. Okay, next item of business.
Can you hear better now, Warren?
Yeah,
All right.
next item of business is Graber Pond.
Yep. So for Grace and Randall, and perhaps David, city has been studying Graber Pond for
Decades.
decades. There have been several studies. There was flood damage in 2018 to a business on the perimeter of Graber, and then some downstream properties. City hired MSA in maybe 2019 to look into both the Tiedemann Pond outlet and the Graber Pond outlet. And ever since then, that design has been kind of hung up with permitting issues because Graber's kind of a natural kettle. It has a historic outlet that is the elevation of which is in dispute. So this most recent round of work, WRMC directed MSA to design an outlet for the pond that would provide a foot of freeboard in a flood condition, 100-year flood passing through the pond with the pond already full of water. So we're talking about a situation where there's back-to-back big storms, or that it's been a wet year and the pond is full or nearly full, and then we have to pass a large storm. So that's about where we're at. Jeff Fellon with MSA is here, and they've done some preliminary design work, and they're ready to kind of summarize that for us. And Jeff,
Do I need to be at a microphone or
you
can
can,
folks hear me, or how does this?
you need to stand at a mic.
Okay.
So there's one at the podium to our left here.
Testing.
I think it's working.
I think so.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. As Eric said, I'm Jeff Fellon from MSA. I'm here to provide an update on the Graber Pond Outlet design project. Eric provided a brief kind of background of where we've arrived at today. The latest memo or bit of work that we did and wrote up a memo for it, as Eric had mentioned, was to look to create the freeboard at National Electrostatics, and then also at the houses along the overflow path from the pond upstream of the Misty Valley Road culvert crossing. One thing that's important is to note in this process is back in July of '01, DNR set the ordinary high water mark at 904.16.
21.
Did I say '01? 2021. excuse me.
2021 that happened?
Yeah,
And
July.
Tell me the number again.
904.16 is the elevation that they determined the ordinary high water to be at. So this last round of work, we were modeling under the boundary condition of having that Graber Pond starting water surface elevation at the equal to the proposed outlet elevation of a structure. The other things that incorporated in this last effort was some updating of our model based on the proposed Bell Farm development, the proposed reconstruction of Parmenter Street, and then a diversion of an area referred to as Tribeca that would now go to a regional pond versus going to Graber Pond. So those were the conditions that changed from the last round of modeling. Up to this point, or since the DNR set that ordinary high water mark, there's been discussion of the need for a lake level order as part of the permitting process for any outlet structure at Graber Pond. The discussion also involved the requirement for an outtake individual waterway permit and then some likely a general wetland permit. There wasn't any indication that there'd be an issue or a challenge in the permitting of an outlet structure set below the ordinary high water mark up until recently. And that's an important thing for the committee to keep in mind. So the results of this last round of modeling showed that lowering that outlet to provide freeboard at National Electrostatics resulted in more flow getting dumped from the pond, in keeping in mind that the pond elevation was starting at that outlet structure elevation. So there was not a lot of bounce available or volume available to store water to attenuate flows. So we're dumping more flow out of the pond as a result, or to get that freeboard created at National Electrostatics, and then running into challenges with conveyance capacity across the Misty Valley Road culvert crossing and putting some of those homes at risk of flooding. After that process, DNR came back upon some further nudging to try to get a little bit more clarity on what the permitting requirements would be. And they provided a challenging scenario for permitting an outlet structure with an elevation, an invert set below that ordinary high water mark. So the discussion went from a lake level order is likely needed as part of this individual permit process for a structure below the ordinary high water mark, to we being the DNR, don't think a lake level order is the proper mechanism to evaluate this permitting application, and instead a public rights, let me make sure I get the verbiage right, public rights stage investigation would be more appropriate. Further input was that DNR traditionally has not allowed for outlet structure invert elevations below an ordinary high water mark in natural or public water resources, i.e. Graber Pond or kettles, similar kettles. So this last round of input from the DNR regarding the permitting doesn't paint a very great picture for the chances of a permit application for a project that proposes lowering the outlet from Graber Pond as being permittable. Is there a question or comment?
Just to boil this down, because it's a complicated situation for sure, and I don't follow all this stuff either. If we were allowed to lower it below 904.16, we would then buy ourselves some storage to be able to mitigate under some conditions, downstream high flow impacts. Is that, am I getting this or not?
Lowering the elevation gets you some freeboard at National Electrostatics.
And also, yeah.
Lowering the elevation dumps more water out of the pond sooner and potentially creates flood risk for the homes along Misty Valley.
Well, but Jeff, you could have a couple of feet worth of storage.
Above that lower level, you still have a structure, a control structure that would store water temporarily behind the
You could,
weir, right?
but then you're going to put National Electrostatics. If you have the outlet structure, say at 904.16 set to the ordinary high water, and then have your berm remain higher than that, your eating into or eliminating altogether your national electrostatics freeboard during a 100-year event.
Okay, I didn't ask the question correctly. I was asking if we were allowed to go below 904.16 from some magical decision from DNR, that would buy us some space to store water and mitigate a little bit of the downstream flow. Is that?
I think a bigger factor is what the pond elevate. Yeah, if you're able to
Permanent
set
pool
that
would be
permanent pool
lower.
lower to your invert, yeah, then
Like-
you've got some more bounce.
But everything you're hearing from DNR is that they're not gonna allow that to happen. They're gonna require us to stay at 904.16.
That seems to be the sentiment that's being conveyed from the DNR based on past precedent or past instances.
Even though this was a pond that at one time went dry, it's a kettle pond.
I think I had the last correspondence with DNR permit staff, and the question I asked was, doesn't the historical manipulation of the outlet matter? And he basically said no, but at this point, I'm not certain I'm speaking with the right staff, or shouldn't, take the conversation up to the next level or 2 levels higher, maybe.
Their reason for the 904 is to preserve the wetland that's adjacent to it to keep the water level up,
Basically protect the public resource.
the wetland.
That's where they
Wetlands
set the
or
ordinary
the
high
outlet.
water mark, yeah.
Pardon?
That's where they set the ordinary high water mark, and that's based on the last couple of years before 2021 that were so wet and when it flooded and overtopped, et
Yeah, I mean,
cetera.
I wouldn't call that the ordinary high water mark, but it's a high water mark.
I think it'll change over time, and that's what I'm trying to get across to them, is that it's not fluctuating over time through perhaps some bad decisions. We've allowed it to lift up. At least that's the research that I've found since I came to the city and started looking through the old files.
Well, back-to-back years of 45, 50, or 60 inches of precip will raise your water level.
Sure.
I mean, those are our highest 3 years probably in, I don't know how many years, 100 years we've had, so maybe ever. So, okay, but I guess there's nothing we could do about it. They're the one to control the high water mark.
So
So we have to go from there.
let me just add this. So in conversations with them, they had said, we can't, an entity or a permittee has a right to apply for a permit. So they're not going to tell you or us at this point, it's no. They've provided kind of what they've done in the past, but that doesn't eliminate the ability to apply for the permit and see what is possible. They didn't give a great picture of prognosis or forecast, but I lost my train of thought. I'll come back to it.
Just for an aside, what's the elevation where the national electrostatics starts having negative impact?
905.50 is their low opening.
Well, recommendations from Eric is to continue this effort to get a lower approval for a lower outlet elevation. Right?
Oh, I don't know, Warren. I'm pretty frustrated at this point. I think I wanted to ask for direction. I do believe now, looking at what Jeff came back with, it seems obvious that we need to try to build some storage in the pond to attenuate flows downstream.
So your second choice was abandon the effort.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Abandon, that's what he said, abandon the effort.
Well, Okay, I just heard you say, Eric. I wish I had captured it. We're still trying to find, assuming DNR is not gonna budge, assuming 90416 is the number, we only have a foot and a quarter to play with then, right? Up till we impact electrostatics.
Right. And the other issue, and and this is the way we asked him to model it, was a worst case scenario where the pond is full.
Yeah.
I don't agree. I don't think that we should change that direction. I mean, we're looking at this flood condition. The other options would be to look into flood proofing national electrostatics,
No,
which would be complicated.
no, we can't do that. No.
And there are other adjacent riparians, who are essentially impacted by this higher elevation.
So the obvious one then is to develop an outlet with the invert elevation at 904.1. And have you done that study?
Yeah, we've modeled scenarios where we set that invert at 90416 at the ordinary high water. Problem is, under the boundary condition of the pond being full to that, when the 100-year comes, there's not a lot of storage available in the pond, and that water goes downstream and then creates flood risk along the houses along that overflow route. I think I will say, through the process of this, one thing that's pretty clear is that I think the 30-inch culvert in Misty Valley Road is severely undersized. And that could use some extra capacity. Whether anything's done at Graper Pond outlet ever again, there's past flooding that has occurred there. So it's kind of a side note, but that is something I think worth mentioning as part of this study.
So
What's
look-
the overflow right now? We have kind of a stop log or a weir there.
It's just a
No, it's
natural-
just earth. Yeah.
What elevation is that?
905.
905.1 is what Mars used in 2010 and what we're still using as the current overflow. The Psyche report in 2006 was 904.0.
So we did nothing. The pond would overflow at 905.
905.1, and it would, that's too high for electrostatics. If you look at the table that's up on the screen, option 1 is setting an outlet elevation at 904.16 and leaving the overflow at 905.1 where it is. That still results in 2/10 of flooding at national electrostatics. And the peak outflow is 574 CFS. He's got 4 6x4 box culverts under that road to pass that flow.
Which is likely not feasible.
We need storage in Graber.
Yeah.
And, okay, I mean, it puts us back in the same. It's just what you said, Eric. We need storage. The only way we're gonna get storage is by allowing us to build a weir at a lower elevation. And going back to DNR and throwing ourselves on their mercy and see if they'll allow that. That's gonna cost money because it's gonna take more analysis on our consultants' time, right? And more permitting process to try and go after something that's got what you've said is not a 0 chance, but a low chance of happening. Is that correct?
I'm pretty frustrated. Yeah.
But if we don't do
That's
anything.
what I said.
We're building 6 culverts underneath Misty Valley or underneath the high road, I mean. Well, that's Misty Valley Road. That's not even High Road there.
That's correct. And these flows, they'd be attenuated by the Misty Valley system, which we're trying to get redesigned also, but you're talking about an awful lot of flow.
Yeah.
For this analysis under this worst case scenario, and it's going to pass through Misty Valley. It's going to pass across High Road where there's also just a 30-inch culvert, I think. And on downstream, past Pheasant Branch Road and into the Conservancy.
What happened during the 2019 flood, right? August
18.
2018.
Yeah, there were, I think, four or five homes upstream of the Misty Valley culvert that were inundated to some extent.
That was much better than the 100-year flood. That was probably, who knows, at that site, it could be 200 or 500-year flood.
Yeah, but we also don't know what the starting elevation of the pond was.
No.
So,
It was probably down. Well, we've had a lot of water before that. I wouldn't bet on being down.
Yeah, we did.
Because 2018 was pretty wet.
Yeah, the June.
Right.
Yeah, so it was probably full.
I think from the 2010 EOR study, the historic normal water elevation was 902. Who knows what it was preceding the 2018 event. The other thing that I'll just throw out there is the lowest low opening of those houses along that outlet path between the pond and Misty Valley Road is 9044.
Like you studied this in detail, Eric, I guess we'd need a recommendation from you for direction that I think anything we provide, we're just sort of guessing.
well, I think I should continue to talk to the DNR and try to find an avenue to get something in place here that makes sense for everybody.
Agreed.
I feel at this point, we've come this far that trying to make sure we've exhausted all avenues
so,
with
too.
DNR communication is a relatively small effort at this point relative to the big thing.
Will this require an amendment? Put you on the spot.
Well, I don't know that. I think we have probably all the information we would need to present a case or to try to further the discussion with the DNR.
You have budget to carry on right now, and this is
Yeah, there is some.
part of your
budget
scope, although it's expanding now.
There is, I don't know exactly where the budget stands. I know that there's some remaining funds under this last amendment. I can look at that and get back to Eric and see, but I mean, I think that there would be minimal effort from a modeling standpoint to try to come up with a couple more scenarios to present to the DNR if they were interested in that, but I really think the bulk of the effort at this point is in conversation and discussion with the DNR.
Yeah. I mean,
And maybe trying to flesh out a little bit more detailed history
Yeah.
of the pond, and the manipulation or past historic manipulation of the pond
Right.
outlet.
you've already, and I don't know how far you've gone with that information on historic conditions and elevations that were existing and what the pond is when it dries up, what that level is, those kinds of numbers. If that would have any sway with our friends downtown, or Fitchburg, I guess.
Yeah, the way it was phrased to me is they set the ordinary high water. If we propose an outlet below that, you're reducing or lowering or shrinking the public resource. That fringe is no
Yeah.
longer.
Yeah.
And that's where they got hung up.
Even though that public resource was only that high during maybe 3-year period.
Well,
So if we do lower it, does it then become a dam, a storage reservoir? Is that different criteria?
I don't think so. A few years ago, we did get a determination from DNR that it was not a dam. I don't see how it would become one if we lowered the water elevation.
Because certainly it's not built as a dam for retaining water, just essentially dirt just dropped there, so it's.
No,
not
I
constructed.
disagree. There are two berms in this northeast corner of the pond, and those were both, I believe, constructed by the farmer owner of this land.
Well, I don't think that necessarily would qualify as a dam construction as far as type of soils and compaction that took place.
Right, but what my point is, or my point's always been that there's nothing natural about the outlet of this pond.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you can see what I'm showing on the screen now, there's an original berm right here where the water line is in this photo, or maybe that's just a algae line. And then there's another berm that was built later on, which is right in through here. And this is the same berm that MSA is proposing to, modify as a part of this outlet. But there's two historic berms. And I think they were both built to facilitate cropping by the farmer, to hold back the water so that he could farm it.
Those show up, that the berms show up in the 94 Plata survey.
Yeah, we've got some historic information. I'm going to have to.
Going back to that previous one that shows the different scenarios, which one scenario then would you want to see, Eric? That's scenario 2?
I think that's still up in the air. I mean, I think the more flood storage we can get, that's a good thing from a lot of different perspectives. There's a very vocal group, Friends of Pheasant Branch Conservancy, and they voiced their opinion that they want the exact opposite. They want us to hold back as much water in Graver Pond as possible by not lowering the outlet.
So if we put an elevation below 904, that would be we would discharge water, say it was at 903, we would discharge water anything above 903, right? Or something like that. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
So then
902 and a half.
Or
902 and a half.
92 and a half. So we would discharge water, keep it at that level. So the pond would be full when the 100-year flood comes at 902.
Right. And we'd still have 2 feet of available storage to attenuate that.
Someone
Discharge
might say the 100-year flood might come on top of that, but then we're back to square one again.
right. Yeah.
Tough to handle every imaginable.
No, but if you're designing a spillway or an outlet structure downstream, you might want to consider the worst case scenario. That's how you would design a dam.
So from basically from the commission, I hear us asking to try one more time with DNR to see if you can get a lower outlet elevation.
And have them think about the balance between the public resource of the water and the public resource of having the storage area. So that can help reduce flooding.
Right.
I mean, both are public interest things, and I understand the conservants, the Friends of the Pheasant Branch Conservancy perspective on it, but I think we also need to make our point that this is something that is very important to the public as well, not just for 1 or 2 people, but it's going to serve a much greater number of people.
The worst case scenario is it's 904 and we build an outlet structure in a downstream channel to handle it with box culverts down Misty Valley Road, right?
Yeah, I don't know if it's physically,
It's just gonna cost money.
it would be hard to fit in four,
Yeah.
5x6, 4x6 box culverts.
Yeah, we don't.
You
I
would-
mean, that's,
You would probably have to look at grading between the outlet and Misty Valley Road to create some type of additional storage.
Storage behind Misty Valley.
Yeah,
Yeah, so you wouldn't have necessarily bigger culverts. You just want to protect the property so you don't flood the homes. If the road overtops once in 100 years, that's not,
but I'm not sure that the road is lower than that lower.
oh no, I mean, that's the issue.
That
Yeah.
house walkout at 904,
Below the road elevation.
what did I say? 90404, that's,
You,
yes, it's below the crest of the road.
yeah, I think the road's about 907, Jeff. So-
application for a house.
That is the, you know, what
Should have been allowed.
agreed. That was,
Cheaper to buy the house.
well, you know, home builders like exposed basements. And if you don't stop them, they build them right in the middle of drainage ways or directly adjacent to drainage ways.
So if we had a floodplain study done in the outlet of Great River Pond years ago, I guess we could have prevented that.
Do we-
Okay, so what more direction do we need? Anything? You need a motion from us?
I don't think so. This was a status report. I hear a consensus to keep trying with permitting with DNR and come back later.
Okay,
Good luck.
Okay,
I'll see you again.
thanks for your time, everyone.
Thank you, Jeff.
Eric, I'll be in your
Like you normally do.
Yeah.
Sound.
No, but it's not connected to the.
I mean, that's the other alternative. I couldn't hear you, like connect through the internet and I would hear you sound like it.
Yeah, you probably get feedback, I'm guessing, if you try
It
to
would
do
probably
that.
be delayed.
Maybe.
Yeah.
How's the audio, Julie and Grace?
Good on our end for me.
Okay, the next item is enhanced phosphorus removal by a proposal by Chuck, by Nan and Associates. So Chuck, you want to make a presentation or you want to introduce it, Eric, what we're looking at?
Yeah, Chuck Nan approached us with a proposal to look at, you know, an enhanced and exciting system to capture phosphorus within Confluence Pond, which I think we're all in support of. Staff's question is just whether or not the city should be funding this and if it's been scoped well enough, I guess, to take this first step.
Chuck, Chuck.
Take it away.
Yeah, so I'm happy to be here. My name is Chuck Nan of Nan Associates. I was at a presentation at NASICA in the early spring, and there's a presentation on enhanced phosphorus removal by Richard Redapool and Kevin Connors. They had successfully done this in two ponds here locally, one down in Verona, the Wisconsin Marine Pond, and also the Alliant Energy Center. What struck me right away, I was very interested in, was the fact that this adding alum to ponds removes not only total phosphorus, but also dissolved phosphorus, which is very difficult to remove. You know, we have these TMDL mandates that we're looking at 85% removal of total phosphorus. Well, half of that is dissolved phosphorus typically, and half of it is particulate. Particulate phosphorus is removed in the detention basins, but the dissolved phosphorus oftentimes isn't. The other thing that really intrigued me about it was the fact that adding alum or other type coagulants not only takes the phosphorus out of the water column, but also inactivates the sediment, phosphorus in the sediment below. So I actually invited Richard Redapool and Kevin Connors to come out and possibly look at some stormwater ponds here in Middleton that we could maybe look to do something like that. We originally started at Lakeview Pond and looked at that. That turned out to be maybe not as big an area, not as much contact time. And actually Herb Garn suggested that we look at the Confluence Pond. The Confluence Pond has a lot of good data from the USGS. 10 years of overlapping data of both dissolved phosphorus, total phosphorus, sediment, flow. And so it's a real good area to compare and see what we're looking to do as far as, alum injection. So basically, we prepared this proposal to look at, basically looking at the basic data and also collecting some jar samples and doing some titration of, how much aluminum are we talking about here to be added to the Confluence Pond. So that's what presented in front of you tonight.
I have a couple of questions if it's an all right time.
Sure.
Thanks. So you mentioned two projects, the Alliant Energy Center in Verona. Were those alum injection or were those alum application?
It was an
Like, was this-
application. I'm sorry. I
Okay.
said injection. I misspoke.
No, I don't think you clarified. That's why I was asking. And so what is the Wisconsin DNR's view of alum injection?
Well, it's a good point. One of the things with alum is you have to monitor the pH and make sure that it doesn't get below 6. And so part of this jar testing is really to do that, to monitor the pH and to make sure that it doesn't get below 6. But they did go through a permitting process in both these projects, and we're able to get DNR approval to apply alum to these two ponds.
Yeah, that's good to hear. And I've been involved with some other projects in Iowa that were for lakes, so different than stormwater ponds, and so in a different DNR, they were fine with alum additions. They were not fine with alum injection. So I was just wondering if you had any experience or indication which way the Wisconsin DNR was looking with regards to the method of delivery versus not the coagulant itself.
Grace, what's your definition of injection and how's
So
it?
doing the flow versus going and doing an application periodically.
Gotcha. Thank you.
So the flow weighted. Yeah, sorry.
And I guess I might have misunderstood that too. We call that a dosing where we
Okay.
dose it. And in the Confluence Pond, we are thinking actually that we would look at a dosing site upstream versus applying it just one time only to the pond. The reason being is that there's a really good dosing site right upstream on the North Fork of the Pheasant Branch. And I think it's real obvious that when you look at the data, the North Fork Pheasant Branch is the predominant source of both dissolved phosphorus and total phosphorus. And so we focused our approach on the North Fork, just dosing that due to the fact that they have, I think, 7 times more dissolved phosphorus load than the South Fork and 4 times more total phosphorus load than the South Fork. The other thing that struck us right away was that we looked at the seasonality of it and, where is this stuff coming in relation to the seasons? And it jumped right out at us that the early spring runoff is the predominant source of both dissolved phosphorus and total phosphorus from the North Fork. It's almost twice or 3 times higher than any other month in that. So we would gear our approach to that early spring runoff. We're primarily dealing with manure from farmers' fields and the fact that the ground is still semi-frozen there. As much as 50 to 60% of the total load of dissolved phosphorus is coming during those 2 critical months. And that is why we looked at not only alum, but also ACH, which is a hydrochlorite. That's another typical coagulant. The reason we're looking at that as well is that it has a lower freezing point than alum. And we think that if we're dealing with something, the 2 highest months were actually February and March. We're dealing something in February, we may need to consider another hydrochlorite just to the fact that it has a lower freezing point. So we're going to do jar tests on both. we recognize that this problem is coming from outside the city of Middleton. And I think we're looking to get in a discussion with Dane County, some pushback. We're just looking to get started here with doing some simple jar tests and doing some data analysis. Then we'll go to the county and say, hey, this stuff's coming from the town of Springfield. And they should participate fully, or partially, if not fully, in moving this forward. We're just trying to get started with this simple first step.
That's
Chuck,
great.
your procedure, how you're going to dose it, and how during the storm you're going to anticipate a storm coming, or once a storm's there, you start putting the dose into the stream, and then you're going to collect samples at the outlet. And this is going to show what improvement we have, reduction in phosphorus.
Yeah, I got a little ahead of myself. Looking at the dosing and the dosing strategy and stuff is actually a next step that we'll be looking at. Right now, the scope is just basically to look at the data analysis and come up with a idea of, what we're looking at for mean residence time and phosphorus loads and such, and then do the jar tests of both ACH and alum on 3 separate storm events. We would actually work with the USGS. We talked to Todd Stenelbeck about possibly utilizing some of the samples that they gather for their analysis. They could maybe give us some to do this analysis for our work.
So this study here wouldn't show whether it works or not. It's just a matter of how the procedure you're
I'm
testing.
sorry, no, it would show. Basically, we're looking at adding different amounts of alum to different samples to get to that 90% removal. And we would come up with a right formulation, if you will, of how much alum we need to add to remove that phosphorus to get that 90% level.
But you wouldn't take samples at the outlet then to see whether it was a removal?
My understanding is the USGS already monitors phosphorus, daily phosphorus and dissolved phosphorus, both of the downstream station, and they have 2 upstream stations.
Right.
So that's already being looked at. We don't see any reason to do any more monitoring since they're already monitoring that.
So then you look at that data to see if there was a reduction.
Correct.
There is another tributary that comes in
Yeah.
below the outlet of the confluence pond and the gating station.
I talked to Todd about that, and I think, we probably would apply some type of a factor to account for that.
Yeah.
Because you're right, the stations are not right at the points we are
And
at. So,
when I
yeah.
calculate the reduction by the confluence pond, I have a factor that we apply
yeah.
for
Yeah.
addition. So
I should say too, actually what I found was just looking at the data that the 2 big months there on the North Fork, February and March, the actual loading is actually greater coming out of the ponds than it is going in. So it's actually certainly is a source of phosphorus, not a sink for those 2 critical months.
That's just, sorry. I was just going to ask, is that how much internal loading do you think is happening in the pond proper, and then it's getting flushed out with these high flow events?
That's a very good question. One of the things that I guess found out in talking to Bill Sibig, actually at the USGS, is that these ponds are going anoxic at the lower levels. And because they're going anoxic, that's allowing the removal of phosphorus from the sediment in the bottom. And we haven't done any measurements on the confluence pond, but Bill had done some measurements on the Cherokee ponds in northern Madison. And he told me that they were anoxic from mid-May to mid-September on the bottom. And those were about 7 feet deep. Our pond, the confluence pond's about 6 feet deep. And that was a real surprise to me. I always thought anoxic conditions occurred in, very deep lakes in the summer. But the fact that we were seeing anoxic conditions in more shallower ponds was kind of surprising. So
Yeah.
yes, there is some phosphorus being released from the sediment due to the anoxic conditions.
but it's not picked up by our gating station because they only sample during runoff events.
Well,
Would
yeah, there's some work out of Minneapolis Storm Pond showing that a lot of that internal loading phosphorus gets built up. It's really common for stormwater ponds to go anoxic in the bottoms. And then it's getting flushed out with the high flow events. So maybe it is getting picked up in that high flow, but it's not necessarily an originating in the watershed phosphorus source.
Right.
It's the internal source being flushed.
Right. I should mention too, we've added to our team, I would team up with Richard Weddlepool and Kevin Condors, who've done this before, but we also have added this Harvey Harper, who is a national recognized expert in doing just this alum, either, injection or dosing, as well as alum application. And he will help us in dealing with some of these issues as we move along.
I need to make comments here. I'm trying to listen to all the comments, and Chuck, my background in some of this area. I'm totally in favor of advancing the treatment for phosphorus reduction. I think the passive BMPs have been using since I started working at DNR in 1980, have gotten us this far, but we need to get this far to, improve lakes. Having said that, this is a major effort, and there's a lot of things going on right now concurrent with this, or still just starting off with this. One is 3 or 4, 5 years ago now, Madison looked seriously at doing this by diverting water out of Starkweather Creek on the east side of Madison. And our company was actually doing the work on that, testing, doing what Chuck's proposing, to test various coagulants and how they perform and how much phosphorus they remove. Indeed, it works. It removes phosphorus and all that. It's a very robust effort, though. The other thing going on right now is that DNR has formed this, what they call Standard Oversight Council. This is a council that looks at DNR technical standards for stormwater management practices. And they develop a document that describes how to build a biofilter, a rain garden, a stormwater pond, a grass swale that will has some backing behind it, so it meets some DNR criteria, and meets numeric pollution control levels, so they can keep track of it for your stormwater permit requirements. So there's a standardized design that's just going on right now for coagulant treatment processes. We've had our 4th, I'm on that committee, so is Dick Weddlepool. We've had our 3rd meeting. This is probably going to be a year and a half process to go through and come up with a technical standard that lays out how to go about this, what DNR is going to accept and not accept, how to get credit for it, and what you have to do to implement this kind of a practice. My opinion is we're getting the cart ahead of the horse right now. And I think we're just too early in the process to start looking at this before we get some more guidance and information from the technical standard itself.
Wouldn't this provide some information for the committee to look at?
Well, my other comment's going to be, frankly, if we're going to start down this road, if Middleton thinks they have $13,000 to spend on this, I'm going to strongly urge we not sole source it. It needs to get looked at by other submitters. As much as Chuck's a great guy and everything else, we don't sole source a lot of stuff without having at least some kind of input from other consultants.
I don't know for what expenditure, 13,000. I don't know about that.
Well, I've expressed my opinion, so
I would just want to add that although we are working on the SOX standard and stuff, this technology that we've used has been around for many years.
decades. They've been treating lakes with alum since I was in schools in the 70s, right?
Yeah.
It works. You spread it
Right.
across the lake.
Right.
It strips the phosphorus out of the lake. It sequesters it in the bottom. The lake gets clearer.
In fact, in 2013,
It
the
works.
city of Madison built a similar type treatment on the Monroe Street ponds. And I hesitate to mention that because it had questionable results, I
Lots of
guess. It
challenges,
didn't
yeah.
work maybe as well as planned, but they were able to get that far in 2013 to actually put something in place and get it to dose, similar to what we're talking about, the confluence pond. When I was at this in the Sika presentation, I went up to Kevin afterwards and said, well, that's really great. Can you do it on a stormwater pond? And he said, he looked at me, he said, that's the next level. That's what we're looking to do, is find a place, a stormwater pond, where we can try this and see if it works in that. So that kind of gave me the impetus to move this along and invite them down to look at ponds here in Middleton.
So when you choose to put alum in, it strips the phosphorus from it. Where does the phosphorus go?
It flocculates on the bottom. And
So it'd be on the bottom of the pond.
well, and that's something that I guess we'll have to look at. I know Jim's company that looked at that, looked in detail at the flock and how to dispose of that. There is some evidence apparently recently, and Richard couldn't be here tonight. He's actually had his knee replaced and on some medication, so he couldn't be here tonight. I wish he could.
It was a hip, actually, Chuck.
He could talk a little bit more about this than I can. But, you know, he said that actually what they're doing now, there's no buildup of the flock on the bottom, that we would have to dredge it in a more frequent manner or whatever. And actually this flock kind of just goes into the subsurface, I guess, and just kind of settles down there and that. So it's not a barrier or whatever that would be a problem for the.
I'll say the jury is out on that one, Chuck, that it's not clear how
Right.
suspended that flock stays, how
Yeah.
consolidated it gets. It's a little bit.
You're
unknown
absolutely right.
right now.
This is kind of, and that's why dealing with flock is another step down the road and stuff. We just are trying to get a handle on, you know, what are we talking for expense? I know, you know, the staff had said to move forward would be $200,000. We certainly could flesh out a better feasibility study and give more detail to it. We just kind of wanted to get this started, and then we'll go to John Reimer. John Reimer from the county actually was one of the primary architects of the 2013 projects and is very interested in this. So like I said, we're just looking to get something started here. I do believe that the city is under, you know, we're supposed to put in best manager practices to get us to, you know, that 85% TMDL total phosphorus removal. And I don't know, are we at 27%? Because we're supposed to get to 27% locally, and then adaptive management will kick in from there. But you know what our phosphorus removal rates are for?
I don't remember, Chuck,
Okay.
for that reach. Yeah, we'll never get to 85% without.
But there isn't a TMDL for the North Fork. It's a TMDL for Pheasant Ranch, I believe.
Correct.
And that's the number.
Yeah.
But you're right. We're not. And that's why we got the adaptive management. We're essentially buying our way to compliance right now. That's what most cities are doing. in
Right,
Dane
but
County.
it's not just all ag, they're looking for municipal practices as well,
Yeah.
but this would qualify for it and stuff.
Oh,
So
Um,
are you looking at other sources besides us for part of that 13.7?
Yeah, I guess the original intent was, we thought we'd go to Water Resources and see if you thought it was appropriate to fund it under the fee in lieu of. If that's not the case, then I think we have some funding opportunities through the Clean Lakes Alliance and also adaptive management, Yahara Winds, and also Dane County. So we could seek other funding sources. We thought we'd start here since the project is in Middleton. I know there's some discussion about, you know, the fact that the phosphorus is coming from outside of Middleton. In a way, it's analogous to, you know, our dredging project we did back in 2017, where that sediment was coming from Madison, it was coming from Springfield, but yet, you know, we ended up having to pay the full price on that, which was unfortunate, but sometimes it's hard to get people to participate in the whole watershed and that. This would just be the start of it. We'd approach John Reimer, and I think he has some strong interest in this to move it forward, but.
If you want to, my motion may not be popular, but it's going to be to defer this to further down the road till we get more information and also see more what the SOC committee is coming up with, the Standard Oversight Council is coming up with to,
And that will be probably 2 years down the road.
well, it's going to be, I'm not saying we need to wait till all the ink is dry, but at least until we have a better idea of what they're going to come up with. Might be summer, fall, I don't know. Those things tend to drag on, as you know, Chuck.
If you talked to Dick about this since you're on the committee again,
Mhm.
Dick obviously,
We don't see eye to eye all the time, like, surprise, surprise, you and I. My other issue is where, I'll just lay it on the table, where this has been done in Dane County with Dick and others at the Verona site and the Alliance Center site. You were applying the alum to the pond. The pond looks great. It does the job. It takes away the algae. It looks clear. It's a nice looking pond. What that does for downstream phosphorus loading, which is what we care about, really. We don't, the pond itself is a water treatment device, okay? Everybody wants it to look nice, but in fact, it's a water pollution control device. So we don't have the answers on if you put stuff in the pond, what does that do to the discharge from that pond? When the next storm comes in full of phosphorus, it fills the pond up again and goes downstream. We don't know the benefit from that at this point in time. And the committee is still working that out yet. We haven't even talked about that yet.
I guess our intent was to dose, multiple storms as they come in and stuff to account for that. You're right. I think, certainly the Dane County has come out with the top 10 contributors of phosphorus into Lake Mendota. And I think we're number 2 with Pheasant Branch Creek. And it really is a situation where, it is all coming from those ag fields up in this town of Springfield.
doubt.
And it is coming in those critical spring months of just those 2 months. So if we can have a focused approach to, attack that, I think we'll be solving a lot of the issues. But Jim, you're right. I mean, there's a lot downstream of there before it gets to Lake Mendota. But at least we'll be eliminating, that's all urban down there.
Yeah.
It's all coming from the ag fields of the town of Springfield.
I'm trying to draw the analogy of what's been done so far in Dane County with these 2 ponds, Verona and Alliance Center, is not what we're talking about
Correct.
here.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
The big
Apple
difference
and
is that
apples
was an
and oranges.
application and we're talking about a dosing site. And the reason, if you've ever walked around the pedestrian path there's 3 culverts. They're like 3,000 feet upstream from the V-Notch Weir. And there's a lot of good contact time there that would allow us to get a lot of good, phosphorus removal by adding alum at that site. So there are some issues, Warren, about the dosage and whatnot that we have to work out. We're just saying tentatively, just looking at it, that seems like a good place to start, but that's not part of this scope. This scope is just to do jar tests and to analyze the USGS data and present a result back to you guys. And
results back to us would show how much you would take the USGS data and show us.
right, we would have
You-
type,
let me try and,
go ahead.
I don't want to put words in your mouth. I think what you would show is with these coagulants, alum, ACH, there's other ones too, at these concentrations applied to the runoff that came off from North Fork, it reduced the phosphorus by X over 24 hours or something like that.
Correct.
It's not going to show us what comes out. And I understand that they can't do everything at once. So it's not going to show the pond discharge. It's going to show how much cleaner
Yeah.
the water is going
Well,
in.
the pond already traps some of the phosphorus, and so 23%. So,
Right.
and it varies from 10% up to like 40% if you look at the data.
Yeah.
And how are we going to show?
We see that's all particulate though.
How-
I think that
Yeah,
traffic
so you look at the
efficiency is
dissolve, we
particulate.
don't look at
We
the
have
dissolve.
dissolved phosphorus loads coming in and coming out of
Yeah,
here.
right.
So we'll be able to easily show, hey, this is not just getting it. I think your data that you presented at the last meeting
Total.
showed that there was some removal there. But what I've seen and just looking at those months, and I haven't looked at all the months yet as part of the scope here is to really analyze the data, but just looking at those critical months of March and February, the dissolved phosphorus is not removed at all. As a matter of fact, it's
Sure.
increased as it
No.
leaves the.
And that's the
pond.
worst phosphorus. It's readily available for algae growth in the lake.
Right, the dissolved phosphorus is the amount that contributes.
So
most
how many
to the
storms would you
harmful
look
algal
at? One
blooms.
storm or 2 storms or
We're gonna go with 3 storms.
3 storms?
Yeah,
If the committee wants to go there, I guess the next thing is fees in lieu of isn't necessarily the intent for something like this, but in the past, we have used fees in lieu of for water resource type studies. I can't remember exactly which ones, but there have been a number of them. But that isn't really the intent of fees in lieu of. But we have used it for things similar to those. So it's up to the committee, I guess, which direction we want to go. Do you have any thoughts on it, Ken?
Yeah, it seems it's like a good thing to do.
I agree, it's a good thing to do, but I'm still gonna urge we hold off for a while to just think about this a little bit more. I think we're jumping into it very quickly. And I'm urging the commission to consider looking at this down the road a little bit. And what a little bit means, I don't know.
I think, well, I understand what you're saying, but I think it might provide some data for further evaluation of the direction we go in the future. And it's not a huge expenditure. And if you get some other group to pay for part of the cost, buy into it, that'd even be a better,
Yeah, the Clean Lakes Alliance, they do have a funding program for this, but it won't be decided till probably, late fall to the winter in that. The other one with adaptive management or Yahara Winds, they fund it on a case-by-case basis and stuff. So we could apply for that and see if we could get some funding to them, if that's the direction you would want me to proceed.
What's your thoughts, Grace?
I had one question about, so for the JAR studies, I recognize the purpose of those. It would seem hard to know what it's actually going to do for the phosphorus budget from this strategy from the JAR studies without considering the sediment phosphorus exchange. And so would that be something that would occur in a future study as a part of this?
Well, I think what we liked about, alum or hydrochloride is that it would attack both. It would get the phosphorus out of the water column and it would inactivate the sediment load. So it would really cover both of those.
Mm-hmm.
The theory, wherever that flux settles, it is sequestering more phosphorus in place, in situ,
Right, as long as the cap is strong enough
Right.
in the rate of settling
it's very
relation to the other
getting
incoming
rid of that
particles.
and taking it to another place.
But over,
Yeah.
Okay.
That has yet to be decided, I guess, how to deal with that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm certainly enthused about coagulant options for this. I do share I'm not sure how much with the information that's going to be gained, what if that's going to be a bunch of hurry up and wait then until other advisory boards come down with their guidance. So it might be a little too soon, but enthused by the idea.
I'm not sure where the committee stands. I guess if you're in favor, Ken, would you be interested in making a motion and then we'll take a vote and see
How
where.
much money are we talking about?
well, I don't, okay, sorry, Ken, the 13,000 change. 650, not change, I guess, it's real money. Ken, I don't want to, if you want to make a motion, go ahead, otherwise I will make one.
You go ahead.
Well, my motion is going to be to defer this to a subsequent meeting, Water Resource Commission meeting, and I'll say 2 months to kind of gather more information and reconsider.
Yeah, I'll second that.
What kind of information are we going to gather in 2 months?
I'll show you some other stuff. I want to get a better explanation of where this SOC committee is and what they're doing and what they're looking at. So you have a better understanding of what that's all about. Chuck, I don't know where you're taking the samples. You didn't say how many samples. You said how many. You didn't say where they're being analyzed. You had no protocols for transferring those samples to the lab. What lab's going to do it? What the costs are for that? I didn't see a parameter list. Is there a parameter list on there?
We've already set this all up through, we did
You didn't
this
say anything,
basically
and
for these
your
other two
proposal is so
ponds.
thin. There's nothing there to go by. I can't.
We would use a lab
Can't
in
make
Lodi
judgments.
that's set up to do this and has done this for the same.
You need to
two
write that
ponds.
up. You need to put that in writing.
Okay,
If we're gonna go with a,
yeah, yeah.
with a project like that, we need to know what we're getting. Right now, I don't know.
We would
Yeah, I
use,
think you should enhance your proposal on procedures and what we're gonna get out of it.
It's
And,
it's a 2-page, kind of
So-
frankly, not very deep proposal. So if we're gonna go this direction, I would need more backing.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? If not, all in favor? Aye. I guess raising our hands is probably a good idea too. Opposed? And motion's carried.
thank you.
So if you could get some funding from other sources too, or partial funding,
Yeah,
that would
pursue-
probably help too.
Yeah, but
Okay.
if I can just, it seems like there is interest in pursuing this. It's just the timing of it. It might be something that is down the road a ways. Is that,
Well, reducing the
understandable?
dissolved phosphorus is a good thing. yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Chuck.
Okay, the next item is potential items for the June meeting. Do you have anything, Eric, that we have on the books that we're going to talk about? I know we've talked about, I'm not sure where we are with our floodplain stuff. Is that still being analyzed by?
It is, and I think the last I spoke with Steve Gaffield, the plan was to come back in June.
Okay, then we've also in our runoff control ordinance, we were going to revise that for the 100-year flood or make it a 200 years. And I added some things for volume control and some other things. So I don't know how that fits into your agenda. I know you're overworked right now, but
Yeah, and you mentioned that last month, Warren.
that you're overworked.
No, that you want to see progress on the ordinance
Yeah.
rewrite.
Yeah.
It is near the top of the list, but to be honest, my to-do list has not shrunk since I started. It's only grown.
Yeah. And I think somewhere down the road, we talked about maybe you and I, what you should bring to our committee, what we want to see. Maybe
And I
we should
did
have
start
some
researching that a little bit too.
Yeah, maybe we should have some discussion of what you think or what you want and what we want to see.
Sure.
There's a little difference between what you're doing now maybe than what we done previously. So maybe we ought to just clarify that and see what the committee wants to see and what you would like us to see.
Sure. And looking for those old records, I stumbled across a discussion from 2020 where you, before I got here, we're talking about the mission and goals of the commission. We could bring that back again. There was a slideshow, I think, that maybe you prepared.
That'd be good background anyway, just for the.
Yeah,
new members,
certainly.
too.
Always good to do that.
I started putting together I'm sure it's maybe the same thing as just a summary of our ordinance. The key points of what, instead of the committee, new members reading a whole ordinance, which is hard to do. Just summarize the ordinance and then how we meet it, how the consultants meet it by their design, what models they use and what rainfall events. Just like 5 or 6 slides that we could run through and just new members might be easier to get on board to what we're trying to do.
Sure.
I've got a little bit of ideas down. I could show it to you and see what you think.
Yeah, and the last time we had the ordinance discussion, I think I did a little 2-page memo, kind of a, stormwater for dummies thing, just talking about the very basic aspects.
Randall, you got the
of
ordinance
site.
memorized, right? You got it all down.
Not yet.
Well, it's amazing
No,
to go through it. There's only about 4 or 5 things. that
Well,
are really-
yeah, it's 20 pages long, but you're right. There's 4 or 5 key things that we ought to make sure everybody understands and,
Yeah.
and
And we talked about
starts-
the 1981 average rainfall.
Why we
What does
do
that
that,
mean and how is
right,
that
yeah.
applied? And so I think there's a few things we could clarify real quick.
agreed.
Okay,
Totally.
if I have time, I'll work on that to get it to Eric. Is there anything else that committee would like to see us talk about? Sometime I'd like to see what the work you're doing on the ponds, Grace. And
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that.
as you know, Grace is working with on Tiedemann's and Stricker's pond, doing a long-term study and research on it, so.
Yep.
Know what the right time would be when you prepare something, I guess, for something else. If you could share it with us, that'd be good.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. I actually on this summer have to give a presentation for National Science Foundation about urban pond work that's been happening at the Center for Limnology. And so this is a big part of that. So I'd be happy to also do a more focused version of that for you all, if that would be of interest. Just summarizing sort of everything that's happening in addition to the work that my group is doing.
Okay,
It occurred to me that maybe it's, again, I'm retired. I'm not making any, I'm not employed anywhere anymore, but maybe give a little background on what Madison did with their phosphorus study, coagulant study 5 years ago. Just to get an idea of what
you're gonna do
what the
that?
steps were. Yeah, I could,
Okay,
10 minute.
okay.
Before we go, everybody needs to say goodbye to Julie and thank you.
Oh, yeah.
This is Julie's last
This
meeting.
your last meeting, Julie?
Yes, it is.
Okay, well, nice having you a part of the committee and I appreciate your input.
What are you gonna do with yourself now?
Oh, I have plenty to do.
All
I'll
right.
find even more, but it's been a pleasure serving with you. I've learned a lot. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie.
Thanks for being
Okay,
here.
thank you.
Thank you.
You're getting a knowledgeable replacement. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.